We have Professor Patrick Bond, political economist and professor at the University of Johannesburg, joining us here on Africa Live. Professor Bond, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. Why is the 16th annual BRICS summit in Russia so important?
Oh, thanks for having me, Richard. Greetings to the viewers. Look, it's very important on the two grounds that Vladimir Putin needs more geopolitical support, and having a sort of consolidation plus 20 other countries that are coming in. They won't be allowed to join this year, but in future years, and that's on Thursday. The second reason is, as you pointed out, there is a bridge mechanism to try to avoid the dollar, because, of course, Russia is being sanctioned. Even the BRICS New Development Bank has joined those sanctions against dollar financing for Russian trade or investment. So what they're looking at is a way to overcome a dilemma where if they, for example, trade with a country like India, they've got too many rupees back in India because of the oil imports that India takes from Russia. But then the Russians can't actually use those. And that's the biggest dilemma that they're facing in terms of not having an alternative to a US dollar as a sort of payment mechanism. Obviously, gold might be such a process if they can back some BRICS currency effort, and international currency grounding in gold is often a historic turn, a gold standard or a Bretton Woods standard. But we'll have to see if there's enough countries ready to join in at some point to make this a genuine alternative to what I think we all need, the de-dollarization process.
All right, Professor, picking up on what you've just said, talk to us about the implications of this summit globally and, of course, for Africa.
You know, if the BRICS summit is the predecessor to next month, the Rio G20 that's going to be hosted by Lula da Silva. Now, the president of Brazil, Lula, has just had a fall. He's got 5 stitches. So he's not, unfortunately, going to get to Russia. He'll have to beam in. And likewise, Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi prince running Saudi Arabia, he won't get there. And that may be because he's hedging his bets. If Donald Trump wins in November 5th in the US election, then probably Saudi Arabia will back out of the BRICS invitation. They've never properly said yes. So this is the maneuvering that's underway. Vladimir Putin yesterday said he wouldn't go to Rio. And one reason is that there's an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court because of the 20,000 children from eastern Ukraine that have been moved to Russia, hence making him a so-called war criminal. Now, these are the factors in the internecine battles as they line up to become, let's say, a major force. South Africa hosts the G20, the big imperial powers, and this sub-imperial network next year. And I think the maneuvering that we're seeing, particularly in expanding the BRICS, probably next year when Brazil hosts, that would reflect who's on whose side in this geopolitical back and forth.
Well, speaking on whose side, what would you say we should expect out of this particular summit in Kazan, Russia?
Well, the public relations, a lot of hype, but unfortunately, as we learned here in Johannesburg about 14 months ago, the last BRICS summit, there may be hype about especially de-dollarization, the need to have a rooting around the sanctions of the West against Russia and Iran. But many of the BRICS countries have, let me call them ruling elites, which face westward. That is, they face to New York, which is what, unfortunately, the problem here in Johannesburg was 14 months ago when the main bankers, the central banker, the finance minister, all nixed the idea of de-dollarization. So I wouldn't have great hopes, although we desperately need some major changes. And the theme of this conference is multilateralism, not multipolarism, but changing some of the ways in which IMF, World Bank, WTO, the other big multilaterals. The biggest one coming up, Azerbaijan, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. That summit starts next month. And unfortunately, the BRICS, with 29% of world economic output, have 51% of world emissions. So again, my expectations are not high that they'll be the necessary leaders on climate catastrophe.
All right, Professor Patrick Bond, political economist at the University of Johannesburg. Thanks for that.